Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. Today is Pride video number 2, and I'm answering a direct question that I got asked actually a couple months ago, but I thought it'd be a really great one to say for Pride Month. This question came to me specifically just said, I am someone who is asexual, and I've worked really hard to get my friends and family to understand that. And now I want to start dating, and I'm worried that it's going to disqualify everything that I've worked for in their eyes. To start off, I want to be super clear. Not everyone who identifies as asexual also identifies within the LGBTQIA+ community. That said, most likely, if you are watching this video, you probably identify somewhat as queer because you found me or the algorithm helped you find me, and pretty much everything I do is queer, so here we are. So while a lot of this video is going to have that assumption, understand that maybe not true across the board. Let's define asexuality. It is a spectrum, and you can fall anywhere on that spectrum. The spectrum essentially is anywhere from experiencing no sexual attraction to some sexual attraction. What does some mean? That's really up to you. There's no quantifiable way to measure this, which is why it is something that is very individual and a bit harder for people to define for themselves. You might hear me using the term allosexual. That is someone who does experience sexual attraction. There are people who identify as asexual who will also use terms like homoromantic, biromantic, heteroromantic, panromantic. That means that while there is not any or there is little sexual attraction happening, the romantic interest is fitting into those categories. To be honest though, there's also people who identify as ace who will also call themselves bisexual, heterosexual, gay, lesbian, and that's fine too, because those labels are robust enough to work for people. It's really not our job to decide what labels fit other people. Again, see my gatekeeping videos. Also, to be clear, there's an entire group of people who fit under the aromantic umbrella, which is no romantic attraction. This video is not necessarily going to take a lot of time in that vein because that is its own video and deserves its own video. This video is about people experiencing romantic attraction, but not sexual attraction or not much sexual attraction. Attraction can generally be divided into 4 parts: aesthetic, sexual, platonic, and romantic. We are talking about the sexual and the romantic ones during this video. All right, to the person asking this question, great job, first of all, putting that work into helping people to understand, because to be honest, that's not your job. It's not your job to make people understand you. It is other people's job to do the work to understand you and who you are. You're not their Google. They have that usually on a handheld device that they have in their pocket or in their hand at most times. Them not understanding you wanting to date is also their problem. But I appreciate what you're saying here, so let's get into how you can deal with that. You wanting a romantic connection, an emotional connection with another person, you wanting to date someone else. That's Lily, by the way. You wanting a romantic connection with someone is not bad, and you have every right to that. You also have the right to not have to explain that to people. Should they look at you and say, see, I knew you weren't asexual, now you're dating, which, as I understand, is sort of the fear that you have. I get that fear. That's an understandable fear because so many people conflate dating with sex and sexual attraction, because why would you be dating somebody if you're not doing that, I guess, is what people assume. The assumption that you have to be doing sexual things if you are dating someone is so deep rooted in our society as a whole that is not something you are going to untangle for them by yourself, nor is it something that you should have to. You've already had to do the work for yourself to understand how that works. That's not your road to walk for them. But let's differentiate sexual attraction from romantic attraction, shall we? Sexual attraction is a type of attraction that is driven by the desire for sexual activity or intimacy with another person or persons. It'll usually involve physical desire and the anticipation of sexual experiences. Romantic attraction is a type of attraction that would be characterized by the desire for romantic interaction and emotional connection with another person or persons. It can involve a range of behaviors like dating, cuddling, holding hands, and is intended to form a deeper bond with that person or persons. To be clear, intertwined attractions is when both of these attractions are intertwined, and that happens for a lot of people. Whether that's natural or society has sort of expected and taught us that those are intertwined, really hard to say. Just like it's hard to say which one necessarily comes first because it's different for everybody. For some people, a romantic connection can then create a sexual attraction, or a sexual attraction can lead to romantic connections. But for many people, those two things are intertwined and are linked. Then you have them separately, which is what we're talking about here. We talk about people on the A spectrum, which is where romantic and sexual attractions are not connected. That romantic attraction that you are feeling for someone really just has no connection to the sexual attraction that you may or may not feel. For everyone, this experience itself is different. Some people prioritize the sexual attraction. Some people prioritize romantic attraction. Some people need both in order to consider the connection positive at all. There's so many different ways to prioritize or even want any of these attractions. And we're only talking about 2 of the 4, that prescribing one universal experience really does detract from the depth of what a relationship can be, and really the depth of what people can handle. That, I think, is really what has been exposed over the last couple of years when people have started to understand the differentiation between asexual and allosexual, and what romantic connection versus sexual attraction versus platonic connection and aesthetic connection, and what all of that means and what we're capable of. People is the richness of intimacy is so different than we ever thought it was when intimacy was just talked about in terms of being sexually intimate with someone. That's not all it is. And some of you know that I, in my real life, am a couples therapist, and so many of my conversations with people are about intimacy. And when I'm talking to them, often the conversations are about the expectation that intimacy is sex. And that's not to say that sex is not intimate, but intimacy has to be more than that. If any of you follow me on Instagram through my practice, you've seen me explain that intimacy has to be more than sex. Because when it's not, you're not looking at the full picture of every person involved. Because there's no possible way that every relationship boils down to everyone involved understanding love and connection in the same exact way as everyone else in the world. However, that is exactly what the concern is in this question, which is, okay, everyone has understood me to be asexual, and so they don't expect certain things will be happening in my life. And then I start dating, so they expect, because sex and sexual things happen in their life in romantic relationships, they're now expecting this to be happening in my life. What do I do with that? And that assumption, do I have to re-educate them? You don't have to re-educate them, but you never have to educate anyone. It's kind of a moot point because you're asking the question. But I think this goes deeper than asking about what they're going to think. And this is where I get kind of concerned, because I don't like upsetting people usually. But when people have this fear, my automatic question is, what are you actually afraid of? Because if you are getting into this relationship with this other person, why does what they think about your relationship and whether or not you're going to be doing sexually intimate things matter if you are comfortable with who you are? My question becomes, are you having a hard time with this societal idea that in a relationship you are supposed to do sexual things? It would be an understandable thing if you were, because that is by and large what I hear from most people through the channel, through emails that I get, through social media posts. That is what I hear so often from people who are on the A spectrum, is that they're conflict internally is, how real is my asexuality, and what do I owe to my partner who is maybe not asexual? And what does this mean for me as a person or as a partner or as a participant in society? Like, what does that look like? But here's the thing. It looks like what you need it to look like. I think when we started having those really open conversations about consent, we made a mistake as a society, because we said that enthusiastic consent was the only type of consent. And I don't disagree. And we left asexuality out of the conversation when we said that, because there are people on the ace spectrum who do experience some sexual attraction. What people decide to do with that in the context of their relationship is their business. As long as all parties are consenting and understanding what that means and in control of what happens to their bodies, there's nothing wrong with what those decisions mean, right? But the expectation of like enthusiastic consent is a misnomer when we're talking about how people experience sexual attraction. And understand, I'm not saying people who don't experience sexual attraction should just go ahead and have sex with their partner because their partner wants it. That's ridiculous, right? Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what you and your partner decide to do is your business. But you get to decide that, not society, not your partner, you, period. And you get to have a partner, you should have a partner that understands and respects that. But that does require conversation, and that does require trust. And if you don't have that trust with your partner and you can't have those conversations, that is something to think about in your relationship, because you don't owe that conversation to your partner. But if you can't have that conversation, then what's happening in that relationship? You know, I have this conversation with people in regard to bisexuality a lot. It is never required to disclose that to people. You're never required to disclose that because it's not something that is harming someone, you know? But if you can't disclose it because it's not safe or your partner's not somebody that you trust, and it's not because it's like early in the relationship or something like that, but like your partner's inherently not someone that you trust, that does lead me to the question of like, why? You know, like why? The fact is, a person's want for connection with another human is a very understandable thing. And you don't have to excuse that or explain that to anyone. You do need to understand what it means for you, because you deserve to show up fully in a relationship and fully in spaces outside of your relationship. And if that means you're going to get questioned incessantly about like what you and your partner are doing intimately or not doing, that doesn't seem safe unless those are people who have earned the right to ask those questions. And if you can't set up those boundaries with those people because of the nature of your relationship with them, that actually says more about them than it does about you. And that would be a cue to maybe rethink that relationship with them if possible, because they are not safe people for you to exist around and be yourself around. That's obviously outside of the question you're asking, but like, hey, what's happening here, right? If you are unsure about what that means for you as far as an asexual person, but you have this desire to connect with someone, that does not throw your asexuality into question. In fact, if you find yourself in romantic connection with someone and you do feel a bit of sexual attraction to them, that also doesn't call your asexuality into question, because it's a spectrum, and wherever you are in that spectrum still exists on the spectrum. Right? Like, you don't just plot a point on that line and stay there your whole life, do you? In anything, really, but you're not just going to stay there. There may be times that you're in different places in that spectrum, and that is only for you to determine. Only you. And none of that discredits or calls into question the validity of who you are. Listen, the thing is, people are desperate to understand things they don't understand. So in terms of the people outside of your relationship, these people that you are talking about not understanding you, people are so desperate to understand things they don't understand. They will dehumanize the people that they are trying to understand in order to get the concept, which is ridiculous. but it happens. Watch it happen all the time in the news, in media, in the ways that people conceptualize entire groups of people. They dehumanize people to make them into groups and put them into boxes and categories so that they can be understood and therefore not individuals anymore. And often that is led by fear. And that fear is either felt by them, by people outside of your relationship. And like, I don't understand this, so I'm afraid of it, so I need to make it make sense. And my context is relationship and sex is the same, maybe because they've never separated out the two for themselves, or because that actually does work for them. And so I need to understand it. So like that, their fear of the things that they don't understand is kicking in, which leads them to dehumanize you in your relationship. Or it could be a fear for you and those sort of like latent internal misgivings or prejudgments about what relationships are and about what connection is and everything that society has taught you for years. When you're not in a relationship, it's easier to separate out the two. When you are in a relationship, those teachings that society gave you come back sometimes. So the same reminders that you would give them about the fact that your identity is valid, no matter how you present it, it still is valid, are the same things you need to say to yourself. Because it's valid, and who you are is valid, and it's okay. You are still allowed to have connection with people if you desire connection. It doesn't change who you are. And there's nothing wrong with who you are, so you don't need to change who you are. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all next time. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and happy prep.